I will take you through a story that comes out of one of the separate countries. And it's a story of crime, and it's disturbing, and you should know it's disturbing, and it's going to, well, really anger you. And I'd invite you, before you see this or hear it, depending on how you are experiencing this, that you ready yourself to be upset, but to not hate the people involved. That's so tough, because we are not to hate our neighbor. And yep, you know what? We have criminal neighbors. Prior to you hearing this, I will tell you a brief Seattle story so you understand that none of this is odd. None of it's oddball. This isn't something that you don't expect in Seattle. Just a very quick story. There was up the hill from us a pastor, retired pastor, living in his home, and he and his wife had lived there their whole lives, something like 30 years. And I remember talking to people who responded to this, a cop who responded to this. She quit the police force because of this particular event was the one that drove her over the top. He was in his house when he smelled gasoline. Now, that's odd. Why would I be smelling gasoline? And then he heard someone moving around in his yard. At a 2-story house, he was downstairs. There's one of these separate entrances, an entrance straight into the living room, and he heard stuff being banged up against his door. He looked outside the little peephole, and he saw a man stacking things against that door and pouring gasoline on it. And the retired pastor said, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "Today's the day you die. I was told to burn you to death." And the guy was trying to strike a match, trying to burn that man and his wife alive in that house. Now, why did that cop quit because of that? I'll tell you that in a second. Your house, your business is something you're going to want to protect from bad smells. Not gasoline, we would hope, but things like cat odor, pet odor of all sorts, wet dogs, cigarette smoking. If you smoke cigarettes, please quit. It's not just the smell. Imagine what it's doing to your lungs. It could be that you have really tight spaces, tight quarters. You live in a dorm, an apartment, your kids do. Maybe you're traveling the country in an RV, or you are like me in a studio where we can't open the doors and windows. And we're in here, well, sometimes 6 or 7 hours of recording. This is simple. It's not loud, it's not big, it's not intrusive, it's not an air filter, it's an air purifier. It's called the Eden Pure OxyLeaf 2. It's this simple. Plug it in, it produces ozone. Those O3 molecules bond to the molecules that create bad smells, and they zap them. This even works with viruses, and they'll save you $200. Go to EdenPureDeals.com, enter code TOD3. Boom, you save $200 and you breathe a breath of fresh air again, no matter the space in which you inhabit. That's whole home coverage, $200 savings, EdenPureDeals.com, enter code TOD3. The officer who shared that story with me, she retired, quit the police force, retired early because that guy tried that to other houses. The same thing, burning people alive. And was let go after having tried that. He wasn't put on a psych hold. He wasn't put in prison. He was let go. She'd also had the experience a week prior to, in the same area of Seattle, a family who came home from a vacation. And they saw that there were people who had erected a campsite in their backyard. They had a nice big lot with some trees. And these people said, "Hey, you know what? Let's go in the backyard and put up our tent and cook meth and take heroin and let's go back and make it a sex party." So they did. The man came home, with his family, and he went to the backyard and said, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't be here. This is our yard." And they said, "Get out of here." He called the police. This female officer was one of the officers who responded, and here's what they were told. You can't do anything. They have every right to be there. This family is going to have to, first of all, file a civil complaint, prove that they don't have a right to be there. You can't prove in civil court, but preponderance of doubt, beyond preponderance of doubt, that's what they were going to have to do. Instead, it might have been the case, possibly, that the male officer went back that night, possibly, without his badge, but with his gun, and helped the campers, we're to call them, make a decision to leave. My decision on this for leftist politicians who live this way are to let them go first. First idea is to give them an app that would prevent them from calling 911. It would just lock their phones out. No 911 for you. The other would be to pass an amendment. You don't get to have 911 coverage if you are someone who doesn't want other people to have the police be able to protect them. Here's why I bring this up. If you're looking at the images, you see a woman with her dogs. This comes from the New York Post. And this happened in Seattle. It's not strange. It's not something that's once in a lifetime. It's not something that you wouldn't expect. You expect things like this to happen in separate countries like Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles. Watch and or listen to this.
Citizens reported that an individual was herding a dog at Brighton Playfield. Animal control officer was dispatched to that scene, found a dog that had been stabbed to death at that scene, and noticed that the name on the collar of the dog that was deceased, the owner of that dog was the same name as our victim, Ruth Dalton, in the homicide. Officers then responded, were able to locate the victim's vehicle. The carjacker was able to leave the scene of the original carjacking in the victim's vehicle. That vehicle was located down near Brighton Playfield. Our latent print techs and our crime scene investigators responded to that scene, processed that vehicle. Our latent print examiner was able to lift a print off of the victim's phone that was left in the vehicle, which identified our suspect. Our suspect is a 48-year-old Jamed K. Hayes, Seattle resident.
None of this is weird. Now, it might be weird to you, but none of this is weird in the separate country of Seattle or in the separate country of Portland or in the separate country of Los Angeles. There's a technique I champion, and it is incredibly effective. It is forcing people to live in the worlds they're creating for others. That's why I'm a proponent of a law, and it would be very difficult to pass, I admit that, blocking politicians like this from calling 911. So why don't we use their ethics against them? Why don't we have them pledge to not call 911? Because, of course, the police bring violence and mayhem. And to help them not do it, why don't we give them an app that will block it from their phones? Why don't we take that step? Every time we make these people live in the world they're creating for others, we see massive change. When Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, decided to make the cities that are leftist, who are big fans of open borders, live in the world they're creating for him, we saw some political change. We saw President Trump see his support among Hispanic and black voters triple, in particular black voters, up to 22%. They said, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're letting illegal immigrants in here, giving them $2,200 a month and 10 grand cash sometimes. Now California wants to give them $150,000 to buy houses. You're making these cities run by leftists live in the rules they've created for the people of Texas. We did the same thing with the perverse pornographic sex ed in schools. Back in the day, courtesy of Rush's program, where I got to guest host for many, many times, we made a decision to tell people to go to the school boards and read the perverse pornographic sex ed into the records. You all see what happened. That won the Republican governor his seat, Youngkin, in Virginia. It also revealed how perverse the schools have become. Take this step. If you live in these leftist cities, be the activists that go to the city council meetings, the county council meetings with the pledge. You so recognize the violence of the police on behalf of the empire of white supremacy that you refuse to call 911. Once they take that pledge, reveal the app exists. Hey, we're here to help you with your pledge. Just install the app. And then we'll report that you did it because you are a promise keeper.